Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Eliana Kernodle. Donald Trump took back Pennsylvania's 19 electoral college votes early Wednesday after an intense campaigning schedule centered around the Commonwealth. Joining me with more on this story is the Center Square's Pennsylvania editor, Kristen Smith. Kristen, what led to President Trump's victory in Pennsylvania?
There's a lot of factors. Typically, it's the ones that analysts and everyone who voted know to be true. It was his messaging on the economy, his promise to basically fix everything that the Biden administration broke. I think every time we go to the grocery store, every time we fill up our gas tank, every time someone gets laid off, or, all of the economic struggles that people have been really feeling the pain of, honestly, since pandemic recovery started, that has not left people's minds. And unfortunately, Biden and Vice President Harris are getting the blame for it. Whether they deserve it or not, depends on how you see economic policy. But both candidates, and particularly Trump, they really targeted Pennsylvania as the place to win. They spent so much time here, particularly in the lead up to the election, but throughout their campaign. I think it's important to note that Donald Trump began his campaign 2 years ago, and he was always coming to Pennsylvania. Then you have the added symbolic factor of the first assassination attempt on him was here in Pennsylvania, in Butler. And I think that moment was a big turning point in the election. It was, and there were a lot of turning points in this election. But as far as Trump winning Pennsylvania, I think that this was a big turning point. I feel like that's a pretty objective thing to say at this point. And so he suddenly became this heroic figure in the eyes of a lot of voters who supported him. And he also really leaned into this political outsider who was really trying to defeat the establishment. He really connected with Pennsylvania voters and probably across the country, but I know particularly in Pennsylvania, his ability to shed that billionaire status that he has. Because you got to think about it. He's very, very wealthy and has never grown up middle class in any sense of the imagination. He was still able to convince voters who are working middle class jobs, who may not have college degrees or might and still can barely keep their heads above water. He really connected with them on that level. I think it was no accident that when he pulled his what was really a publicity stunt and a troll of Kamala Harris, when he worked at McDonald's for 30 minutes, he did so in Pennsylvania, in southeastern Pennsylvania, the region that he really needed to court because it's right outside of Philadelphia. And based on results, he did. He flipped one of suburban Philadelphia's reliably blue counties, which is Bucks. He flipped it red for the first time since the late 1980s. So that really seemed to have made an impact on the voters here, just really appealed to their sensibilities. Since we're, 2 days out from the election, we're able to look a little bit deeper into how different, county level, how people voted and why and where the shifts were. And he just made gains across the board in cities that are generally deep blue and traditionally blue. Even there was in Philadelphia, they don't have townships, they have voting wards. And so there he picked up a couple in the northern part of the city, in the southern part of the city. And that, again, speaks to his ability to really reach urban voters who in many elections past would have never considered him. He also picked up larger shares of minority votes for people under the age of 30. He took away enough votes from Kamala Harris in all of those blocks. She still led in all of them. That's not, up for a debate, but he gained 6 to 10 points for a lot of those. And I think a lot of Kamala Harris's campaign was betting on the fact that she would keep those voting blocks strong, but she didn't. And I think that the campaign's insistence in the last week or so to really seize on that floating island garbage comment that was made at a Trump rally and really believe that would turn the tide of Latino voters. It just didn't seem to happen here in Pennsylvania.
And what was the role of Pennsylvania, not just in the national path to victory, but also just in election night?
So it was about 2:30 in the morning when Fox News called it, said that Trump had won Pennsylvania and that therefore he was going to win the White House just because of how close Pennsylvania got him to that magical 270 number. Now, it's important to note that a lot of these big news outlets have their own very technical way of calculating who's going to win a state before we get all the votes counted. And so Fox News uses their own calculation, and CNN and NBC, they all have their own. And traditionally, the Associated Press is considered the gold standard for this. And the Associated Press actually didn't call Pennsylvania until 5:30, but because these other big organizations had started to do it in the hours before, we noticed a really remarkable difference in the behavior of the campaigns at that point in the early morning. Kamala Harris her campaign was hosting a watch party at Howard, which was her alma mater in D.C., and she wasn't there, but the campaign was, and it was anticipated that she would come speak later. But as the night wore on and they were losing more and more states, Pennsylvania was really the big linchpin here. Everyone thought that, she needed to win Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin in order to get to the White House, because Trump had most likely won the other 4 swing states, most likely won North Carolina, Georgia, Arizona, and Nevada. So yes, the other 4 swing states. And so when it was called for Trump, that really, you can see, at her watch party, it started to empty out. And the campaign manager came out and told the supporters gathered there that, we're going to call it a night. We'll revisit in the morning, see how things go. There's still a lot of votes out there. So it was definitely a turning point in the night. Kamala Harris did not concede at that point. She didn't call Donald Trump at that point. Nothing like that. On the flip side, Trump's campaign, once this happened, definitely made plans for Trump to come on stage at Mar-a-Lago and basically declare victory. By the time he got on there was, of course, a few more states called for him, places that were reliably going to be red, like Alaska. And so he came on about 2:30 in the morning, 3 o'clock, and was giving his victory speech. And so Pennsylvania, as we predicted, not only was really important to the outcome of the race, but really changed the tenor and the direction of the night once that happened.
Well, Kristen, thank you for your insights on this story. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com.